Hi, everyone. Welcome to FinFactor. I'm your host, Blaine Bertsch, co-founder and CEO at Dryrun cash flow forecasting software. And joining me today, I'm really excited to have Jonathan Lacasse of Lacasse Advisory Services. Jonathan and I have just met, probably just a few months ago, but we've had some really fun and interesting conversations. So I'm actually just excited to dive in because Jonathan knows everything M&A, but is really helps his clients a lot on the buy side. And so that's something we're going to just start to dive into because right now, with the way the world is and the markets are, we're going to see a lot of transactions of businesses over the next couple of years. Thanks for joining me, Jonathan.
Thanks for having me on the podcast, Blaine. It's my pleasure to be here.
So, Jonathan, before we dive into the topic here, why don't you just give us just the Coles Note version of what you do and who you are, so people kind of know what we're digging into.
Absolutely. So I'm a chartered business valuator, also known as a CBV. For the last 10 years, I've worked for mid-size accounting firms. The last probably about three and a half, four, I led an advisory practice here in Alberta for a larger international accounting firm. And since April, I've started my own advisory firm. So at Lacasse Advisory Services, we do business valuations. We do, as we're going to dive into, some buy side, sell side advisory support, as well as financial modeling and litigation support services.
I can see that being a growing topic of concern. But I'll be honest with you, what I really love about what you're doing is there's going to be a lot of activity in the markets. Like we're talking with businesses every day. It's challenging out there. There's a lot of businesses that are struggling. There's going to be some motion. There's going to be businesses selling and the buy side, so that it's like, hey, we can buy this business. We can offer more services. We can give ourselves a little bit more stability. We can expand our market, whatever it is. But for business owners to be able to go and talk with an expert like you, I think is incredibly valuable. But it's also I think there's an advantage of knowing in a way, like I can go talk with Jonathan rather than I can go and talk with a logo that I'm familiar with, but I don't necessarily know who I'm talking to. So I just love the fact that now you're kind of have started your own firm and people can talk directly to you and they can get directly to you. Keep pumping your tires here, Jonathan. But what I do want to do is actually dive in a little bit on what you've been seeing lately, especially on the buy side. Like as you're seeing opportunities, what are you seeing out there for businesses and sort of what's happening in the world now of transactions?
Yeah, no, no. Again, thanks for the promotion there, Blake. It's been incredible. I mean, what I've seen is so. I mean, I've transitioned out of the larger firms, and now what I'm able to do is go back to my network now and really start to have conversations again. I think with fees and again large big logos, big companies, I think it's a little intimidating for a lot of business owners. I mean, the larger corporations, absolutely, it makes sense. But for kind of me or you, if we were looking to invest in, let's say, a small business for passive income, or you know what, maybe we were just tired of making money for somebody else and decided, you know what, I want to make something, I want to put something of my own out there. For example, one of the conversations I often have is folks coming to me with businesses that they've come across, whether it be on MLS, whether it be from business brokerages. And a lot of the time they don't know what questions to ask, right? These are intelligent individuals. They've been in the workforce for a while. Some may have bought and sold businesses already, or some may be looking to do this for the first time. But there's a lot of apprehension in the
Mm-hmm.
market. There's big dollars being thrown around, right? Even a small business, you're still looking at north of $500,000, and if you're using leverage, this could jump into the 1, 2, 3 million. So for
Mm-hmm.
the average individual looking to make an investment, this is a big deal, and there's a
Yeah.
lot of questions that they have.
And like the thing that sort of strikes me, is valuation is obviously it's important on how do you actually put a price on something. But I suspect valuation in itself is also an indication of the literally the value of the company to the purchaser. So in other words, is this actually a good idea? Like they might see an opportunity and say, oh, this sounds like one hell of a great opportunity. I think it can do all of this for me. Um, but maybe it can't. And maybe that valuation side might be like uh, uncovering some of these, maybe some of the things where it's like, geez, I don't think this is going to draw as much or generate as much revenue as I thought, or maybe it's going to cost me a hell of a lot more than I thought to run after we would acquire it, right?
Oh, totally. And I've got goosebumps right now because there's so many different tangents you've touched on there. There is price versus value, and we've all seen GameStop now is in their second run of completely separating price and value. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's really understanding again if you're the business owner, understanding what the intrinsic value of your business is before you go to market, right? If you're
Mm-hmm.
looking at selling, it's one of a few things. You've had suppliers or other customers or maybe third party individuals knock at your door saying they're looking to buy you. You've had perhaps a life event and you need to sell now, which is really unfortunate, but it happens far more than we would like. Or you know what, you're proactive and you're looking at that 3, 5, 10 years out, being like, look, it's a great opportunity now. I like what I'm doing, but I can't see myself doing this and grinding this out for the next 5 to 10 years. I want to look to maximize the value of my business.
Mm-hmm.
And those are very different situations, but they all are important to understand the intrinsic value of the business before you go there. Because the
Yeah.
last thing you want to do is to go into negotiations not really having a threshold of what your business is worth. And again, I mean, valuations is an art as much as it is a science, and you'll get a range here, but it's really important that you understand. And if you work with a valuator that really, I really emphasize and take pride in the education piece of what I do. It's
Mm-hmm.
understanding how we get to the maintainable cash flows of the business. What is a
Yeah.
prospective purchaser going to do to your cash flows as they're starting to normalize your earnings? It's understanding the risks associated with those cash flows, right? The multiple invariably is generated from the risk of the cash flows. And it's helping the business owners understand, whether it's on the buy side or the sell side, what factors come into play that move that needle one way or the other. Personal goodwill is a perfect example, right? We have
Mm-hmm.
so many in Alberta, we have so many small business owners, right? That is the backbone of the Alberta economy. And so we have so many business owners that have put their blood, sweat, and tears in growing their businesses over the years. And you talk to a lot of them, and it's like, well, I'm involved in the day to day, all the nuances of the business. And it's this huge sense of pride. And,
Yeah.
and it should be. I totally get it. Um, but it's having these challenging conversations with those individuals where the nobody's going to pay for that, and it's really tough to bridge that gap and helping them
Mm-hmm.
understand that the best businesses that folks can look for when they're looking to buy, or that you should have when you're going to take it to market, are ones where the answer is, do you take vacations? Yeah, I spend 6 months of the year in Hawaii and my business runs itself.
Yeah.
There, you've transitioned personal goodwill into something somebody's willing to pay for, which we call commercial goodwill.
Well, and I think the thing that when you start talking about sell and buy and all of that, um, and I don't have a whole lot of experience. I've sold a business before, but it was not like this massive, difficult deal, in depth deal, or whatever like that. But it does sort of run chills up my back a little bit because like a lot of my friends are entrepreneurs, right? And so over the years, you hear some good things, but there's a lot of horror stories I've heard on both sides, and oftentimes the horror stories that I've heard are is a result of a lack of data, a lack of information. And usually what I've seen is what sort of led to that is um especially on the, like, I'm thinking of a couple buys, it was a bit of that sort of confirmation bias, and it's a bit of, well, I'm buying this business, but it's based on the one part of the business that I really understand, and boy, it
Yeah,
looks great, that one part looks great, and they told me everything else is good.
yeah.
And
It
all of a sudden 6 months down the road, it's like, yeah, no, I'm in trouble and I'm digging myself out of it, and I got to pay out all of this and I got to do that. And I'm like, I'm in, big trouble, and some really, really hard lessons. And when I look at those now in retrospect, that's talking with an expert like you, like basically going, here's information, here's data that you might not have, that it's like, it's just cold hard facts, probably would have gone an incredibly long way, because it widens that tunnel vision of, I understand like the operational side or the delivery side or the something side, but I kind of think everything else must be okay.
Yeah, and it's a tough lesson, like you said, right? Again, businesses aren't transacting for small dollars. And I think that tunnel vision that people have, that confirmation bias is too prevalent.
Yeah.
And it's often what I do as an education. And it's really a learning process. I had one individual that I'm still working with them. And the first one that they came to me was operating business being sold on MLS, which was scary enough.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but as we worked with them, I mean, the financial information initially was terrible. It was till receipts that the
Mm-hmm.
owners were giving my client, and asking him to make big money decisions. And I couldn't reconcile it to the kind of crappy financial statements that we saw. And then when we were able to dig deep enough, it was, well, the company can generate, call it 50 or 60K of seller's discretionary earnings. So take EBITDA or normalized cash flows, and we add back what the owners paid themselves. And so this individual had a job, has a job. And so you're looking at quitting your stable job to buy a crappy job. And we we came to an understanding that it's probably not what they were looking for. And so it evolved. The next business that this individual brought forward was one from a brokerage, and in this case, it was a retail business. And so now I had actual information from. So I had a confidential information memorandum, a SIM that they provided me, and that I could then go through. But the same thing, I mean, bright individual went through, all had questions that he had for the M&A advisor and the owners. And then I went through and I started asking a lot more questions. And it was
Mm-hmm.
really neat. It was one of the first times where you really see the value you're able to provide. Because especially spinning off on my own, I'm like, is the work that I do worth what I charge? And every now and then I have solid imposter syndrome complex, and you wonder about that. And then you have these conversations and you're like, you know what, the experience that I have really is valuable.
Yeah.
In just kind of looking at all the different expenses on the income statement, in understanding in this particular case the owners or the vendors own the real estate as well, and the real estate didn't make sense for what the operations were. So there was
Mm-hmm.
this huge expense on the balance or on the income statement that needed to have more information teased in. And the thing
Yeah.
with that is you can then use that to negotiate the deal. If that's what you wanted to do, you
Mm-hmm.
can argue, I don't need the real estate that you're giving me. I'm going to go take it somewhere else.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, when people own the real estate and that's part of their retirement plan after they sell the operating business, the entire negotiation table changes. And it's
Yeah.
just those types of conversations, right? Understanding management compensation. I've also advised a bunch of business on the sell side where they didn't, for whatever reason, they were either taking dividends or they didn't need the money out. So they weren't taking salaries. So business looks great. It's doing, I don't know, 150, 200,000 in EBITDA or cash flows, but we
Mm-hmm.
have no management salary in there or no rental because they own the business. So it's these types of things that very quickly the business looks good. You're ready to sell. And then you start to normalize the earnings and you realize this business doesn't make money after we add
Yeah.
those expenses.
Yeah, and it's there's of course motivations on both sides, and you kind of have to dig deep to try and figure out,
Yeah.
like, are they just ready to sell, or are there some warts on there? Are there, is this going to actually contribute to the business if you buy it, or will it just make things incredibly complicated? Like there's so many layers to this. And it's, I think, taking some of the, sometimes it's dumping a bit of cold water onto a potential deal. But you and I both know in business, oftentimes the no's move you forward a lot faster than the yeses. Like sometimes those are the most important decisions you make, or to say no. And that's after you've put money down the pipe. And that's when it's harder and harder to walk away. It's like, you already got money in there. We don't want to throw good money after bad. Like it's, and that can be uh, incredibly important. So it's not just necessarily, it's equipping you to sometimes walk away from a deal, or equipping you to negotiate to get the price that actually makes sense, or the terms that actually make sense. Or sometimes it's just like, yeah, that's a hell of a deal, but you know it, and you've confirmed that this is likely a good move, because um, these are always, there's always risk with a deal like this, even when it looks terrific on paper.
Oh, it's so important. Like what you just touched on is it's so critical when you're going through this. I mean, you get that sunk cost fallacy, which is it's terrifying, and we all do it. Oh, I bought tickets to this event, but I don't really feel like going, but I should probably go because I spent the money. That makes no sense. The money's spent. But it gets even worse when legal fees and professional fees start to pile up. And so when we get into this idea of no could be the right answer, and you know what? For the most part, it should be right. That perfect business isn't going to jump out. I mean, for every now and then it does, and maybe the universe aligns and you're able to find that business, but it takes a lot of time. And I think it's really critical to understand that. I mean, I come into these conversations and I'm very candid. I crush dreams. And I say that with a smile on my face. But again, I'm going to go through. You're really excited about this business.
Mhm.
I'm going to dig out all the warts. And if you still want this business, or even better, if you can justify all of the issues that or challenges I've identified and think, you know what, that still works, right? I know I can bolt on this business into my operations. And even if I pick up, like you said to the example you brought up, even if I pick up that one service line or whatever it is that I'm going after, and I have a big enough uptick in my operations that can go over top and kind of shadow everything else that I may not understand about the business or may not be as good, then at least you understand, right? It's informed. So
Mhm.
I mean, what we do as business advisors, Blaine, is I mean, I hazard a guess to say most business advisors should. We help our clients on the confidence side. We take very complex matters and
Mhm.
we help boil it down to something that they can understand and that they can make confident decisions from. Again,
Mhm.
I know most of the clients that I work with have no interest in being a business valuator, have no interest in really understanding the financial statements to the level that I do. What they want, whether it's from the modeling side with the clients that you work with, line of sight into cash flows, right? Whether it's on my end, what's the intrinsic value of my business? You know what? Then I can make a decision. If I'm going to sell it for less than the intrinsic value, but I know for whatever reason that I need to, or you know what, I get an offer that's way higher. I'm not sitting here arguing back and forth, back and forth. You know what? You get a little more out of the business that you can in the negotiation table, but then you're ready to walk and make a deal. And so without
Yeah.
that information, I think a lot of people are shooting blind, and especially if we're just taking the word for an M&A advisor on the other side and not doing our own due diligence, um, then we got nobody to blame when 6 months down the road or a year down the road, the business wasn't what we thought it would be.
And I suspect right now it's probably more challenging than, I don't know if I want to say ever, but pretty close to ever, than it was even 10 years ago. Because a lot of business models and a lot of revenue models and everything have changed basically since COVID hit, and all of a sudden there's a lot of remote work, and people are buying differently, and they're buying online. They're maybe not buying retail from bricks and mortar as much as they used to. There, and then on top of it now, we've had issues with supply chain, of course, inflation, massive increases in borrowing costs, essentially. All of these things compound. And it's funny because it could be also like, oh, yeah, look how good my business looked in 2019. But what does it look like today? And most importantly, how is this likely to shake out? Because some of these things could take a while to show
Yeah.
either the ugliness or the opportunity. How is this going to play out potentially over the next 3, 5 years? I imagine that's a really big challenge, but that's why people need to be equipped with information probably more than ever.
Yeah. No, that's a really interesting point because if I think of the last 3 or 4 engagements that I've had, they've all had a component of that.
Mhm.
Ones where business owners made a decision, an active decision in the last 3 years to kind of part ways with one of their top clients. Poor payment terms just wasn't worth the stress. So the business owners in this case were like, you know what? I don't care, right? I'm going to see top line revenue drop 20 or 30%, but to me, it's better off. I can replace them. So this was also a business that I was advising on the buy side. But we sat down at the table, and I was at the negotiating table with the sellers and the purchasers, and everybody understood what was going on, the reasons decisions were made. The purchaser could see that the acquisition of this particular firm made sense for their business. It was that bolt on.
Mhm.
The seller was still engaged to work hard and build a different client base back up. But again, it's a conversation, right? It's not just, I love numbers. I could spend a lot of my days in spreadsheets. But as we all know, I mean, businesses are more than their balance sheet and their P&L. When we get into other situations, and when we saw it a lot, I mean, the valuations world was very strange during COVID. Um,
Mhm.
at the previous firm I had, we had clients that were shooting the lights out during COVID. Hot tub
Mhm.
sales. Like, who would have ever imagined you would
Yeah.
see that type of, but now we're seeing the fallout of that. I mean, I think I saw in the news the other day, there's still hot tub vendors that have deposits from 3 years ago that can't deliver. So it's the questions we do and the due diligence that we do. I think a lot
Mhm.
of business deals are done on kind of that old school handshake. We understand we're coming to the table with a mutual level of trust, but money does weird things to people, and
Yeah.
and I think it really is important to dig in and then to have somebody that understands how to normalize one-off years or 1.5, 2 years, right? Like, and like you said, the transition. I mean, COVID had such a material impact and continues to have for a lot of businesses. The ones that were able to make that shift to the e-commerce, boy, I mean, they were able to eliminate brick and mortar costs if they were quick enough at it, and they were able to pick up an entire global client base.
Mhm.
Other ones doubled down, and yeah, you've got other ones that have gone the other way.
Yeah, it was such a strange time, and what's interesting now, well, what's interesting to me, of course, is to see how businesses have adapted so quickly. And what we saw during COVID was, like you said, some were shooting the lights out, right? Like the local bike shops couldn't keep a bike in stock because
Yeah.
everyone had nothing to do, so they went and bought a bike. We went and bought new bikes.
So I did
You
too.
know, yeah, it's like, but now it's like, well, kind of everybody bought a bike, but I think it's not as bad as they thought because it's sort of normalized biking, so people still want to buy, right? So
Yeah.
it's like there's been some changes there. What we've seen just in Edmonton here, a number of restaurants that have been around for like 20, 30 years and were stalwarts were gone within months.
Yeah.
But now as we see restaurants open up, it's like I'm always looking at business model and I find it so interesting. It's like much smaller location, but a larger kitchen. So they're like, okay, we've got a few seats, we can keep our rent low, but boy, can we move product out the door because we've got all this delivery
Yeah.
that was really never there before COVID. And will that stay? Where will that normalize? Where will it kind of settle in? People are now sort of going back to the office, but they're not all going to. So where will that actually settle in? Um, it's still so there's so much volatility. But I think what we're seeing now when we're talking with businesses every day and other advisors and that is during COVID, there's a lot of massive volatility and some killing it and some not. And right now it feels like it's just a big challenge for a large percentage of businesses. It's just how it is with inflation and with all the other costs. It's just hard out there, and it seems like it feels harder now than it has in years. And some of that is the fallout from COVID and everything else, which means there's going to be more sales going on. But one thing
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about, because I'm curious about this, what we've seen a lot, because we work with a lot of CPA firms, and one of the things we've seen, it's not just in CPAs, but I'm going to use them as an example, is service businesses selling, but really for the most part, what they're doing is they're selling their client list, and what comes with it are probably some staff. And I always like that always gives me chills because I'm like, well, first of all, do you know the clients, and are they the clients you want, and how many will you actually keep, because they're not required to go with you, and do you really know the staff you're hanging on or picking up, and if they're not a good fit, can you afford to make the moves you need to make? And so that always is one of those areas where it always seems like a pretty scary deal to me. And I was wondering how you view if you've seen some of those types of deals.
Yeah. So I mean, I saw those deals in my previous life at the other firms. Um, some work, some don't. Right? Mergers. It really is critical to kind of have your post acquisition piece in play.
Mm-hmm.
Again, anybody can go and bolt on a business, but when you're looking at merging in different cultures, when you're looking at merging in different staff that have been treated differently for lots of time, for a considerable amount of time, right? These CPA firms that are being acquired, they're not CPA firms that have started up for 2 years and basically kind of sold out immediately. These are long-standing CPA firms. And like all professional services, it's a huge component of personal goodwill, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
going back to, I go see my accountant because she's my accountant and she has been for X number of years. Um, we know each other on a personal level, that type of thing. All of a sudden, that culture gets amalgamated into a larger firm. Processes change. Um, there's some friction there for sure. So if you're valuing that and you're mapping in that churn with what you're paying, and you can still, again, even if we lose 50% of the client base, are we keeping the ones that we want? Um,
Mm-hmm.
the services that we're able to offer these clients, oftentimes the larger firms are the one buying the smaller firms, and those smaller clients are looking to have access to, or at least the larger firm believes that, access to larger advisory services. So that's a huge cross-selling component in these acquisitions. Other ones, and I was just having coffee with a friend of mine that I used to work with at my previous firm. He recently started off on his own, and he's looking at individuals selling kind of smaller books. So we're a couple $100,000 of books. But we just talked about that same thing, right? In this case, about 40% of the book was bookkeeping work. So now the question becomes, is that the work I want to do? Right?
Mm-hmm.
I want to buy assurance clients or small business owners and roll those into my accounting practice. Do I have the capacity to do that type of good bookkeeping? Um, and
Yeah.
then yeah, I mean one more piece on that one, Blaine, was the question there too that I had with him was how much of those bookkeeping clients are also the accounting clients? Because if they're not, if they're completely separate, one question is how are they operating their practice? Because that seems like an easy
Yeah.
win. But on the flip side, it's also an easy pickup, right? If I'm able to convert even 20 or 30% of these bookkeeping clients to accounting clients, is that worth the purchase price?
Yeah. And what I think what makes those like just that one particular sector, but others are affected in the same way. Um, it's a little bit like the restaurant that's been around 20, 30 years is when you're talking about bookkeeping and tax and compliance, where is that going to go in the next 5 years? And with automation, and are you buying a lot of clients that within 2 or 3 years you may not be able to charge what you expect because so much is now moved to automation, or they can go somewhere else? And where is that component where you offer a ton of value? Now there could be, because like you said, can we pick them up and over the next few years we earn their trust to be their advisor in a lot of different business areas? That could be worth a ton. But knowing that there's a good chance that core service you got them on is maybe out the door.
Yeah, I mean that's huge. And again, if you've got a crystal ball, I'll rent it from you, and then I'll make my money that way. But again, I think where we're seeing the finance world go, if it's able to be commoditized, it's a tough business to be in because you're going to get low cost players that are going
Yep.
to just race to the bottom with it, right? And then so now you're going back to volume, and then it
Yep.
becomes this zero sum game. Now on the advisory side, absolutely, I think that's always where accountants have and professional advisors have really kind of stake their value, right? At
Yeah.
least the good
Yeah.
ones. It's that ability to have conversations and actually look in the future for them. Because as you know, I mean, business owners, especially when times are tough, their heads down. They are just
Mhm.
grinding it out, trying to keep their employees paid, trying to keep their customers serviced. And
Yep.
that's why like what you folks do at Dryrun is awesome, right? Like I don't know how many times I'd speak to clients and how are you guys doing this year? Well, my account's in the black, but I don't really know if I made money until
Yep.
7 months from now when I speak with my accountant. And that is
Yeah.
a terrifying way to move forward, especially if you layer
Yep.
on increasing costs of debt and all of that. So it's a really
Yeah.
being able to look at those flags for them out in front, right? You're looking at acquiring this business. Okay, do you realize that they're you're their number one client? Like why would they pay for you? Or why should you pay for them? Right? If you
Mhm.
give them all their work. So it's those
Yep.
things, right? Even though they may think their business is worth a lot, if you give them 90% of the work, it's it's a tougher conversation. And it's not saying
Yeah.
there's not a deal there. It's just saying that everybody needs to understand that.
Yeah. And and entrepreneurs are optimistic by nature. And like I always say, it's just like squirrels that are cowboys all at once. It's just that's a typical entrepreneur, right? Like highly optimistic, always looking for an opportunity, and but just jump in and it'll work out, right? And I was having a conversation with a friend of mine on the weekend, and he was talking about we were talking about his kind of a retail area here in Edmonton, and he was talking about a friend of his that was looking to open up a shop there, and he goes, his friend mentioned this 10 grand a month on rent, and he just goes, there's no way. There's no way. Like from the outside, he's like, there's how would you generate, because there's not just the rent, there's all the other layers that are connected with that location that are all ramped up as well. And it was a bit of this blind faith of, yeah, but it's a good location. It's kind of like, yeah, you could probably do a tenth the rent in a bad location and draw people to you because your services are so good, right? And it was just this how many times have we seen that? It's a little bit of that blind faith, but I don't, it's when you're forecasting sales and you're forecasting those costs, and it's like, well, if I twist everything this way and I hold my mouth just right, I'll make money. And we have this conversation with users of Dryrun all the time. It's just like, just you're absolute basic on anything. Just do your best, worst, and likely, if
Yeah,
nothing else,
yeah,
and take a close look at that worst, and make sure that you understand it, right? Because I think that optimistic nature um, that business owners have also is the one that's likely going to cloud either a buy or sell. It's like I'm going to sell it and my business is worth a bajillion because I really like it, or I'm going to buy it because it's just my golden ticket and it's easy way to money. Um, and that's not the case. And that's it. It's so I would, bringing in, like I keep coming back to it, but bringing in the realism and data, and factors that they haven't considered into the equation, how incredibly valuable that is for everybody in the situation, right?
Yeah. And again, not just the purchaser, the vendor, but the look at the bankers involved. Look at the professionals and the lawyers involved too, right? You're not I think I really appreciate the ability to come in and be candid with clients. And that whether that's business owners or lawyers that I work with as well. Um, Again, I think there's enough conflict in the world if we can come to an agreement, whether it's in a litigation matter or whether it's at the negotiation table. I always say I think the best deals, the way you know you got a good deal is that both parties kind of walk away feeling like they kind of got screwed. And I think
Yeah,
nobody's
it's
feeling
true.
like I pulled the wool over their eyes and I'm
Yeah,
winning.
yeah,
But it's true, right? I think both sides of a transaction or a litigation matter have to concede a bit and
yeah,
really I focus on working with my clients and having them put themselves in the other party's shoes, right? I think
hmm,
that level of empathy is so critical. We can have our blinders on and we can say, yeah, but I built this business and I grew it from nothing. We see this a lot in shareholder disputes. This shareholder has provided nothing. They came in late. They haven't worked as hard. It's like, well, they're still a shareholder. That what they contributed doesn't really matter when it comes to the litigation and their rights as a shareholder. But
hmm,
also maybe they have provided and contributed to the business. You're just seeing it relative to your own contribution, which is clouded by the last 20 years of work for you.
yeah.
Yeah, it's tough, right?
And to try and go through this on your own is probably like just for almost anyone, probably not the best decision, right? And when you get, the more complex the deal gets, the larger the deal gets, the more moving parts, the more something might be changed by um, just what's happening in, like I said, in the world and in technology and in all of these different layers. The more you need to have a trusted advisor,
Yeah.
like in your camp, that can truly give you the information to make an informed decision. Um, Jonathan, I want to actually dive in because I know we could go on for about 2 hours on this stuff, and we may have to do a follow up down the road, because there's we barely scratched the surface on this stuff, and it's so interesting. Um, but how does somebody track you down if they want to talk with you, and how do they find you, Jonathan?
Absolutely. So LinkedIn right now. So my website's in the midst of being developed. So I'm working with an awesome developer there. In fact, the same one that you guys used. And so LinkedIn, Jonathan Lacasse at LinkedIn, or Jonathan at lacasseadvisory.ca. And
Yeah.
those are kind of the best ways to get a hold of me. And if I'm not sure if you've got kind of notes in the podcast, but happy to give you the contact information there. And
Yeah, do for sure, and I'll drop them in the show notes for you for sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. And the truth is, I love initial conversations. I think a lot of folks come to their advisor with kind of, I hear it all the time, Jonathan, I need a valuation. Oftentimes, after that initial conversation, we're looking at something else. It might be a pricing analysis to just kind of get them a baseline level of what the value of their business is. It could be that they need a referral to somebody like you, Blaine, and they just need a line of sight on their cash flows before they're even ready to sell their business. And I see that a lot. So love to have those initial conversations. And again, this was amazing. Thanks, Blaine.
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan. Like I said, we're gonna have to do a follow up a little later down the road, but I'll drop everything in the show notes. So look up Jonathan on LinkedIn, lacasseadvisory.ca. And if you're looking for a way to forecast your cash flow, model scenarios, understand where your business is headed, come and talk with us at Dryrun. Honestly, the more complicated your business is, probably the more we can help. So come and talk with us at dryrun.com. Thanks again, Jonathan. This was terrific.